From MTN News, this is Montana This Morning.
Good Tuesday morning and welcome to Montana This Morning. It's 5 o'clock. I'm Victoria Hill. Thank you for starting your day with us. Our top story this morning, Muscle County residents displaced by the Bobcat fire are assessing their property today. All evacuation orders were lifted, and thanks in part to the rainfall, firefighters were able to reach 50% containment on the 30,000-acre fire. Officials assume several structures were damaged or even lost, but don't have an official number yet. The cause of the Bobcat fire is still unknown. In Bighorn County, the Sarpy fire is now 70% contained, yet firefighters say they have days of work ahead. Over 52,000 acres have burned between the Crow and Northern Cheyenne reservations. On a positive note, 2 crews were able to pack up and leave, and officials hope to release more in the coming days. In Rosebud County, the 3 fires that burned over 50,000 acres are now fully contained. Firefighters working on the Rice, Snyder, and oil fires north of Ashland are on their way to other assignments. County officials will monitor the area in case of any flare-ups, but there's no threat at this time. Over in Gallatin County, the rain was helpful for both firefighters and evacuated residents. Some were briefly allowed in their homes to grab belongings. The Bridger Foothills fire remained just over 7,000 acres on Monday. Firefighters used the minimal activity to construct fire lines and secure structures. So far, several structures have been lost in the fire. And now we go to California, where the worst of wildfire season is usually September and October, but the state has already seen 2 million acres burned this year. After being blasted by days of record-setting heat, strong winds are expected to fuel fires today. CBS's Elise Preston has the details.
80 miles east of Los Angeles, officials believe the El Dorado fire started during a gender reveal party.
They use 2 pyrotechnic devices. They burn on the inside and they emit a colored smoke. And that device also emits hot gas, which ignited the seasonal grass that used to be behind us.
The fire has since burned more than 9,600 acres and destroyed several homes.
That's gone.
Precious Dykstra lost 1 structure at her mountain resort and petting zoo, but she's thankful to the firefighters who helped protect the rest.
They did a good job.
A record 2 million acres have burned around California, and peak wildfire season is just getting started.
It's horrible, and it's getting worse every year.
Expected to complicate firefighting efforts in Central California today, predicted winds of up to 50 miles per hour.
The strongest winds are Tuesday morning through afternoon.
Power company PG&E says it cut power to more than 170,000 customers.
We would de-energize the lines, shut off the power for safety, so we don't provide a spark.
That could complicate working from home and virtual learning.
With the Zoom and everything they have for their online classes could go down and everything. It could be a real big, huge hassle.
Wildfires are burning in more than a dozen states, including Washington, where a fire destroyed about 80% of the homes in the town of Malden.
This came through like a jet plane, really. It just tore right through here.
And while parts of Colorado deal with wildfires, today's forecast in Denver calls for snow. Elise Preston, CBS News.
And some of that snow will hit areas that have burned, helping the firefighters. Denver had record high temperatures over the weekend and could see records for low temperatures this week. Well, now it's time to turn our attention to weather. Ed's here with us on the set now, and my goodness, talk about how much help the rain was for us, and hoping that California gets some sent their way.
Absolutely, yeah. They really are in a desperate situation. We got a little relief, and the same as Denver. We had the record highs over the weekend, and then we could be close to record low temperatures by tomorrow. And it's a cool start this morning for sure. 37 degrees right now in Billings, a little bit of a north breeze regionally. Now, yesterday we managed to hit 56. Now, that was the temperature at midnight. We spent the whole day pretty much in the 40s by the time the sun came up, but we picked up 54 hundredths of an inch of precipitation here in Billings, and most of the state is starting off in the 30s this morning. Check out Kalispell all the way down to 26 at the airport north of town, and then we've got 30s across the eastern plains, right at 30 in Glendive, and Williston, North Dakota is sitting at 28 degrees today. As far as precipitation goes, Beach, Miles City, Plevna, all over an inch of rain, 1.6 inches of rain, over an inch and a half in Sheridan set a new daily record. And check out the snow in Red Lodge, McLeod, Nye, Melville, over 3 inches. In many cases, we're talking 6 inches around McLeod, and then 5.5 inches around East Helena. For us today, we're starting off mainly into the 30s. It's a chilly start all across the area, and by the time we get into the afternoon, we'll look for those temperatures to warm up only to the low 50s. We'll talk more about the big warm up to come in just a few minutes.
No, it's good to hear there's one of those coming because we caved and turned on the heater, and I sent my husband out to cover up the garden. It's
Yes.
pretty funny. It's pretty funny to watch because it was windy.
Yeah.
Standing there watching. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ed. I'll get back to work and get back to the news.
Okay, thanks.
Continuing our coverage, we have new information on a murder investigation after a body was discovered behind a downtown Billings hotel. 25-year-old Adriano Fowler faces a homicide charge after police say he and a 26-year-old man got into a fight near the downtown Hardee's. The victim's name hasn't been released. On Sunday, the victim's body was found with a large cut on his arm. Police believe he drove himself to the Roadway Inn on 27th after the fight, where he eventually died. An autopsy is scheduled for later today. Now we go to western Montana, where a suspected arsonist became the victim of his own crime. Authorities say the body of 33-year-old Julian Draper was found in the torched Mission Valley Cultural Center in Pablo. Police believe Draper started the fire. He was also arrested last month in another arson. The cultural center was burned down Sunday evening and is home to many ancient artifacts from the Salish tribe. The gift shop was a complete loss, but officials hope parts of the museum are salvageable. And some good news this morning. The 86-year-old man who went missing from a long-term care facility in Colorado was found safe in Billings. Nicholas Golder suffers from multiple medical conditions and had been without his medication since Saturday. Golder previously lived in Forsyth. Colorado authorities involved Montana in the search after Golder called his residents and told them he was in the Treasure State. In other news this morning, influenza season begins in October, spikes in December, and doesn't phase out until March. That's according to the Centers for Disease Control. MTN's Jessica Nelson reports on what we need to know to tell the difference between COVID-19 and the flu.
And there are a lot of unknowns. We don't know what's going to happen.
Dr. Todd Wampler is the St. Peter's Health Medical Group president. He and his colleagues have been discussing the upcoming flu season for weeks. They have identified several elements to help them navigate both viruses.
Since both viruses are spread the same way, we assume that the same things we do to help prevent COVID spread are going to help prevent flu spread.
Which means wearing masks, washing our hands often, and keeping a safe distance from others. Those are all things we can do to avoid both COVID and the flu. But if you do get sick, Dr. Wampler says there is one symptom you should keep an eye out for.
The one symptom that seems to be unique to COVID is the loss of a sense of taste or smell. Now, that doesn't happen with everybody with COVID, and occasionally it can happen with other viruses as well. But that tends to be one symptom that kind of tips us off a little bit.
And what about the recovery timeline if you get either COVID or the flu?
The flu can definitely be a week-long illness for sure, and it tends to be a lot worse than the common cold, which will only last a few days. And definitely COVID symptoms do last a little bit longer.
There is one other significant difference between the two viruses.
There is treatment for influenza that we can give people as an outpatient. There are treatments for COVID that we will give people if they're ill enough to be in the hospital, but nothing that we can do for people if they're not sick enough to need to be in the hospital.
Dr. Wampler says the best way to prepare for flu season is to get a flu shot. Continue practicing COVID safety measures, and remember,
the only way to tell for sure whether you have one or the other is to get a test.
In Helena, Jessica Nelson, MTN News.
And looking now at national headlines, the U.S. is nearing 6.5 million coronavirus cases since the pandemic started, with the virus to blame for roughly 190,000 lives lost. CBS's Elise Preston shows us the latest on the race for a vaccine and the political controversy around it.
President Trump is promising a COVID-19 vaccine soon.
Could even have it during the month of October.
That's just days from the election. The promise is now the latest debate in politics.
I will not take his word for it. He wants us to inject bleach.
Should immediately apologize for the reckless anti-vaccine rhetoric that they are talking right now, talking about endangering lives, and it undermines science. And what's happening is all of a sudden you'll have this incredible vaccine, and because of that fake rhetoric, it's a political rhetoric, that's all it is, just for politics.
Democratic leaders aren't arguing that a vaccine is needed. They question the timing.
I would want to see what the scientists said. If I could get a vaccine tomorrow, I'd do it. If it cost me the election, I'd do it. We need a vaccine, and we need it now.
The majority of voters doubt a vaccine release this year would have gone through enough testing, according to a new CBS News Battleground Tracker poll. The remaining third of those casting ballots believe a vaccine could be a scientific achievement that happened quickly. Meanwhile, some of the world's top drug companies will reportedly announce a joint pact as soon as today that promises to not release any vaccines that do not follow rigorous efficacy and safety standards. Elise Preston, CBS News.
All this comes amid concerns about possible new spikes in cases after thousands ignored warnings to avoid large gatherings over the long weekend. 26 states are reporting more new cases compared to 2 weeks ago. Meanwhile, lawmakers return to Washington today for a short session before the election, but the hope that they'll strike a deal for new coronavirus relief aid is not looking good. Democrats and Republicans left for recess with strong disagreements on the new proposed aid. Since then, key leaders have discussed coronavirus relief with no progress. This comes as states face new expenses to reopen schools and people struggling financially hope for another stimulus check. The hotel industry didn't have much to celebrate over the Labor Day weekend. The American Hotel Lodging Association says people booked just 14% of available hotel rooms. That's down from 41% last year. The immediate outlook for the hotel industry doesn't get much better. Just 25% of people plan to travel for Thanksgiving and 29% will travel for Christmas. Experts predict the hotel industry will shrink by half this year. Thousands of absentee ballots get rejected each election, but this year it could be worse. Coronavirus is creating a surge for mail-in voting, and if ballots are turned down at the same rate as this year's primaries, up to 3 times as many voters might not get a say. Ballots can go uncounted for arriving too late, voters forgetting to sign them, or signatures not matching what's on file at election offices. Election officials are encouraging all voters to double-check these things. Saudi Arabia has issued what it's calling final verdicts for 8 suspects in the murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. Khashoggi was murdered in October of 2018 at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. All of the defendants were spared the death penalty. 5 of the 8 were sentenced to 20 years imprisonment each. Of the remaining 3, one was handed a sentence of 10 years. A spokesperson for the United Nations calls the sentences a parody of justice. And before we take a break, here's a beautiful sight for skiers. Take a look at the snow falling on Red Lodge Mountain. It's already piling up as many look forward to opening day on November 27th. This year's wait for ski season has been a little longer after COVID forced the resort to close early. Red Lodge Mountain will have safety protocols in place this season, and resort staff expects the 2021 ski season to run through April 11th.